Hi, everyone. Welcome to Getting to Know You. This week, our guest is Rob Shelledy. Rob is longtime parishioner at St. Sebastian's, but also works at the Archdiocese of Milwaukee. And I was talking to Rob before this, and I thought, I wonder how many people that sit in the pews on Sunday know that he has such a big, important job in the Diocese of Milwaukee. So we'll unpack that in a little bit. But Rob, how are you?
I'm hanging in there, John. Everything, as somebody that I know always used to say to me, all the big things are in the right place, and so yeah, it's going about as good as can be under the circumstances.
Yeah, circumstances get worse and worse by the day around here, but I do think there's signs of hope, and there's it's been definitely a tense test of perseverance, I think. So we're
Oh,
we're gaining a lot there, and I know that
amen.
your job is probably really important now too as a social justice director. I don't know what the actual title is actually. What is your actual title?
My title is Director of the Office for the Dignity of the Human Person,
Oh,
and
so
when
I got that.
people look at
I
me,
got that totally wrong.
well, I always have to say when they say, "Oh, what does that mean?" And I typically say it is the, Respect Life Social Justice Office for the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, and that's a language that people understand a little bit more. But because everything flows from the dignity of the human person, that's why uh, we decided to use that name, and it's been the name of. I've had basically the same job at the Archdiocese for 16 years, but I think my job title has changed about 5 times. So,
Maybe that's part of the reason I had it wrong. But I love that dignity of the human person concept. And right now, I've started a new cohort of people doing RCIA at SEBS, and I'm teaching 2 introductory classes in theology of Marquette. And I talk more about the dignity of the human person, I think, than anything else. And I feel like my students and my RCA people must be like, okay, you made the point. but I keep going. It all comes back to dignity, doesn't it?
hmm well, and I think that that's one of the incarnation of Christ. The fact that Jesus was human and God is, well, it's the motivating factor of all Christianity. So, and every one of us is made in the image of God, and it is that our kind of opportunity to participate in the divine that really makes life, can make life a source of joy and beauty. And it is extremely important. And I mean, one of the things I think that people just sort of, well, of course, people have a certain dignity, but to really reverence the other person in a way that we're called to, it's a challenge. It's a
Yeah.
real challenge.
Easier
So,
said than done, right?
oh, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Even in very close, personal relationships. So,
yeah. I think about when uh, I leave my socks on the floor and Lisa gets mad at me. And does not respect my dignity. I'm just kidding. Okay, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. I like to first ask you just to tell us about you. Kind of maybe anything you want to tell us about your family, your work, your things you like and do. Tell us about you, Rob.
uh, well, the I was thinking about this the other day. Somebody asked me how long we've been members of SEBS, and it's very easy for me to remember that because one of the first things we did when we joined SEBS was our oldest daughter, Maggie, was baptized there. And, so we joined SEBS in the fall of 1992. And often think about it. We've been the only other relationship I've had in my life that's been longer than my relationship with SEBS is my marriage. And so my wife and I, we live in Wauwatosa now, and we have 3 adult kids.
Can I
Our
interrupt you for a second? What's so
Sure.
beautiful about that is Lisa and I just a few months ago did baptism prep with Maggie, which is fun. Full circle, you know.
Oh,
So,
yes. Well, my wife was asking me when I got this invitation. She said, "Did we have the Metzes for a baptism? Because we did baptism prep for several years at
did you,
SEBS."
are you interested in coming back? I'm just kidding.
Maybe. Uh, but so we have 3 adult kids. Our oldest is Maggie. She and her husband Andy live in Wauwatosa, and they just had well, not just, he's almost 8 months old now, but we have a grandson
Yeah.
Henry, which we are totally over the moon about. And then we have two other adult kids, Katie and Matthew, and Katie's in graduate school in Seattle, Washington, and Matthew's a senior in college in Spokane, Washington at Gonzaga. So we are empty nesting and grandparents. So
How is that? I mean, those are different facets of life. How has that been?
it, it's been great. It is a different. It's a different. You're in a different time of life. There's no doubt about it. And we moved from our house that we lived over there in the Washington Heights to an apartment in Wauwatosa, which was a big move. It's funny that we only moved, frankly, a mile from where we were, but now we're in a new municipality, and so it's a little different, but it's a lot of fun, and it has been a it's a little bit of an adventure, and of course we have the pandemic on top of that, and so that's been a challenge for us. But the fortunate thing for us is my wife works for an insurance company, and she's worked remotely since Katie was born for a long time. So we have all the tech we need to work remotely, and as long as we don't get on each other's nerves too much, it's worked out pretty well.
My mom always says being a grandparent is the most wonderful thing. She says, I think that God's love is most like a grandparent's love. Would you agree with that?
I'm pretty new at this, but if God is halfway as gaga about me as I am about Henry, then I'm in really, really good hands. So,
well said. I like that. Okay, so tell us. We alluded a little bit to your job, but before you get into that, but probably a lead into that, tell us about. I'm curious about your faith. What the role of faith plays in your life, and then maybe talk a little bit about your role at the Archdiocese and the work that you're doing.
When Matthew was going through confirmation class about 6 years ago, he asked me. He said, "Dad, why are you Catholic?" And I told him, I said, in all honesty, Matthew, it's because 1600 years ago, some Irish chieftain was convinced by St. Patrick that the entire village should be baptized. And here I am today. So I am a cradle Catholic. My mother is an Irish American. Her family all came over during the potato famine. But I often say this: I had a great aunt on that side of my family who thought that the Catholic Church, the Democratic Party, and Notre Dame University were all the same thing, and so I came out of that kind of environment. The interesting thing for me is my dad is a convert to Catholicism.
Oh.
He converted well before I was born. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, but so Dad. I mean, Dad converted to the Catholic Church because he was in love with my mom, and it was so important to her that he eventually, even though they've been married for 20 years before he could, say, all right, maybe 15, whatever, a long time, he finally converted. Frankly, he converted because of the Eucharist. The idea of the actual presence of the Lord there was the thing that brought him along, and but I always thought of my dad as having certainly one foot in the church, and he definitely he's very supportive of Mom bringing us up Catholic, and but always kind of had his Protestant skepticism always kind of back there. So, but one thing they really wanted us to do was go to a Catholic college. I grew up in Wyoming in a small town, went to public schools because those are the options. So they really wanted to get all of us to have some kind of Catholic education. And as a result of that, I came to Marquette. I went to Marquette University, and that really helped my faith life a lot. I Teresa and I, my wife, we met there. We didn't date there, but that we met and eventually end up getting married. And the Jesuits have always had a big influence on my faith. And so I'm a cradle Catholic, but I think I often joke with people halfway seriously that every Catholic should have to go through RCIA, because
I
a lot of
agree.
cradle Catholics, we kind of show up every week and hopefully it kind of gets to into us. But I mean, to have that intentional learning process,
Yeah.
I think it'd be very helpful. So.
There's not a better, more fruitful formation experience that I have more than RCA, because it's people that show up that want to learn, that are motivated. It's so much better than working with college freshmen, I'll tell you that.
Everything has its joys and sorrows, John.
That's right. That's right.
But I went to Marquette. I went to law school, kind of as a punt, frankly, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. It was an interesting experience. I practiced law for a while and really had a great, worked with an attorney here in town, a guy named Sam Lieb, who's just a wonderful, wonderful individual.
I didn't know that.
And so I practiced law did litigation.
Wow.
And it, I ended up writing a letter to Time magazine in response to some article they had. And Therese said, maybe you ought to think about going back to school. And so we met with Father Tim O'Brien, who's a diocesan priest, but runs the Aspen Center at Marquette, and who I knew and actually baptized our Maggie. And he said, you could have a good life as a lawyer, but you can have a great life if you teach. And so I went back to graduate school to teach. Long story short, jobs are hard to come by, and we really didn't want to leave Milwaukee. And so academic jobs, yeah, they're few and far between. We wanted to stay in Milwaukee. We realized how important SEBS was to our family. And so I started looking around for jobs, and for reasons related to layoffs at the Archdiocese, a new position had opened up. And so I ended up applying for it, and I got the job. And I've been there for the last 16 years. So it's an interesting thing. So
it's amazing how you don't intend, when we find ourselves in situations we don't necessarily intend to be in, and then we just are. And then it was like, yes, this is the perfect fit. Why didn't I choose this initially?
There was a student of mine at Marquette who I met right after I got this job. And I just saw him. I was on campus. I was walking around, and he's like, telling him about this job. He says, Professor Shelledy, it sounds like you've been preparing for that job your whole life. And I'm like, maybe I have, but it sure didn't feel like it on the way. But I'm really blessed to have this job, because it provides an opportunity for me to live out my faith in a very intentional way. And the social justice teaching of the Catholic Church has always been one of the things that I've been drawn to. So it is I'm just really, really fortunate to have this job. So.
Good. What work does the office do? What's like kind of your day to day?
So my main job is to be the liaison for parishes in terms of their Human Concerns Committee, the Respect Life committees, and then the staff members there. So just like today, I had an email exchange with Margaret there at SEBS about there's a terrible hurricane. The second hurricane in like 3 weeks is ripping through Central America. And so we reached out to the parishes that have twinning relationships in Central America to let them know that Catholic Relief Services is on the ground there and they're supporting that. But then they'll also find out what they're hearing from their twinning parishes down there. And so that's a little unique to the situation now, but that's one of my roles, is to be a liaison to Catholic Relief Services for the Archdiocese.
Right.
I also work with like this again this morning we had the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has an effort they tried to launch this year, kind of got put aside because of the pandemic, but it's a program of helping Catholic parishes walk with young women in needs in cases of pregnancies. And so to make sure that parishes are aware of the resources in their community that can help young women who or any woman who finds herself in a pregnancy and that she needs a little additional support. So
Right.
had a meeting with the Catholic Charities folks and Ann Haynes in the urban ministry and Mary Mueller at our marriage office about how we can bring that to the archdiocese. And so that's kind of typical. My wife says this is a perfect job for me because I talk all the time. And
What about COVID? How is COVID? Are you less busy or more busy these days?
I'm as busy as I've ever been because of COVID, and in mostly because, of course, of the not so much of the disease itself, but of the economic consequences of the pandemic.
Right.
So, I mean, unemployment is well, I mean, it's a little better now, but it's not. It's at least twice as high as it was last year, and I can just tell you, like at the St. Catherine's Food Pantry, where my wife and I help out, uh, the demand now is twice what we had last year.
Mm.
I mean, we've already served over 4,000 people in the pantry, and I mean, it's just, and I know like at Feeding America, where we get most of our food, their demand is up 70%. So, and that's just very typical of places around that. So now it's, for the corporal works of mercy, it's the church is stepping forward, and I try to help people, make those connections and support that work. So.
And our faith tells us, reminds us we have a responsibility to do that. I had forgotten that you were active in the St. Catherine's Food Pantry. What do you do that? Is that a regular thing you do weekly?
We are open the second and fourth Saturdays of the month from 9 to 11. And so, but I mean, one of my jobs is to help order the food. So, so I got to order the food from Feeding America, and then I work with a group of folks who pick it up, and then we unload it. So it's it. I don't have to do something about it every day, but I'm involved with it pretty consistently. And it's been very interesting to be both working in a local food pantry, then also having my job at the archdiocese, because I can kind of see things from a 30,000 feet level, and then I see things from a 3-foot level. And it is it's amazing on all the things that the churches do, but it's also it is one of these things that I realize that we often just kind of throw volunteers into a position and say, good luck.
Anybody will do, right?
Well, yeah, and that's and you got to have warm bodies, but at the other time, you're much better off if you have people who have the interest and the skill set and the training to be able to do a good job of it. So one of the things that's been helpful for me is I've now tried to provide a little more of those training opportunities for just sort of your regular volunteers at church. So
that makes sense, because often when you're providing services like that, you're working with people in their most vulnerable place, and that's a lot to cope with if you're not ready for that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's been a little different because of COVID, because we've been we're for to be safe, so we're not spreading the disease. We're basically handing out the bags of food at the door. Whereas before, the people would come down into the community center, we'd have some coffee for them, we would have some snacks or something like that, and they still got a bag of food, but they got to pick out cereal. We're trying to move the pantry to more of a choice pantry, where it's more similar to your experience at a grocery store.
Right.
And that cuts down on food waste, and also, more importantly, it respects the dignity of the person there. So they get to choose what their family eats, and um, and uh, they're not at the whims of what I'm going to put in a grocery bag for them.
Yeah,
So,
that's really. I mean, it's a small, probably a small change, but yeah, that makes a big difference in how I'm sure someone feels going through that process.
right, right, and I think that that's the thing about it, is that it's very one of the things that it's very easy to get caught up in the just the practicalities of making sure people have a bag of food and handing it to them. And if you're not intentional about that, their dignity, and again, it's that importance of human dignity, recognizing the Vincentians have they talk about seeing the face of Christ in the other. And that's if we really thought about that, if we would really treat everybody um, that we saw is if they were Christ. I mean, that's what we're really called to do. And when my kids watch this, they're just gonna laugh because they're like, "Huh? How you doing in that, Dad? How you doing?"
Yeah, it's easy to it's easy to say those things, and then we have to think about our own actions and how we struggle with that. But Rob, from my perspective, you're doing a very fine job with that.
Oh well, I thank you, John. I appreciate it. I appreciate that.
Anything else you want to say about your job? Because I know it's a big job, and I'm sure we can talk about it for a very long time. But is there anything else you want to share?
The only thing I would say about this, and this is just one of the issues that we always deal with the Catholic Church, is because it's such a large organization, we often think of whatever the different ministries of the church are. We say, oh, the church is doing that. And it's true. The church is doing many, many wonderful things. But it's important for us, just as individual Catholics, to also take responsibilities for those ministries as well, and to be, engaged in a little more intentional way in, where we're being called. Because as we often say at the Shelledy House, the dishes don't get done by magic, and so somebody's got to be carrying out those ministries.
Yeah, that's good. If you could come to my house and tell my kids that dishes line, that would be helpful. My last question for you is, what are your hopes for the future, whether it be at St. Sebastian's or in your work in the Archdiocese or in the greater world? What hopes do you have?
A couple of things. I mean, my immediate hope is that we are able to muster the perseverance that we need to get through this pandemic so that we come out of this terrible time a little better versions of ourselves, and realizing the terrible pain and suffering that we've gone on, and certainly there at SEBS. I mean, we know we've lost parishioners, and it's awful. It's just a terrible time in that regard. But I think that is like anything, is hopefully as we kind of bear the crosses of the day, that we're a little bit, we improve, we become better. It's that modus that we're always striving for a little more excellence. And then I also think one of my hopes for SEBS is that it can continue to be, it it was a great it was a great community for my kids to grow up in. It's a great community now, and I just hope that it continues to be that kind of challenging but comforting community that I think all faiths, all of us should be. It's sort of to help us grow in our faith, to challenge us to be better Christians, but also to provide that comfort that we need in times of sorrow, so that we can gather around. We had a memorial service for my mom several years ago, and Father Larry was the pastor at that time, and he said it, and it was wonderful for us, for my siblings, to kind of also gather around with our cousins. We have a large extended family around in Milwaukee, so they couldn't travel back to where my mom's funeral was in our hometown in Wyoming, but they could be here. And it was just great. And they were both complimentary of Father Larry, the way he presided, but also they could tell that we had this great community surrounding us and providing us with love in that time of loss.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing, and an important role I think that a home parish needs to provide. But your words also remind me of my favorite definition of a prophet. Maybe the church is called to be prophetic too. That the prophet is supposed to conflict the comforted and comfort the afflicted.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That we challenge people that need to be challenged, but we make sure to lovingly embrace people that need that comfort too.
Right. Well, and I think that, and I mean, as I was thinking about this before, I remember one of the things that I think is a great thing about a parish community is hopefully you bring different people together, people with different ideas, different thought patterns, and all that. And I can think of two very specific incidences of fellow parishioners challenging me about my behavior in a way that was helpful for me. And it wasn't related at all to the church, but they knew me through the church, and we were involved in, frankly, it was youth athletics. And it was a great thing. And if we hadn't been parishioners together, I'm not sure they would have done that.
Yeah. Trusted your relationship enough to be forward and honest with you.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, actually, they were just mad at me. But it wasn't something that ruined that relationship, because we had it, and it was very, very helpful to me. Very helpful.
That's good. That's good. So we also have to be open to that critique too sometimes,
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you can only do that. Well, I shouldn't say that. You're best at doing that in a place that you're loved.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you've built up some trust, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so anybody should be able to walk through that door and know that they're in a community where they're going to be loved, but also to expect they're going to be in a community that's going to challenge them, that's going to it's a great line I read in a book about Benedictine spirituality, and sort of being a good abbot to yourself, to set the bar high enough that it's a challenge, but not so high that you're always missing it.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Rob, this has been a really fun conversation, and enlightening too. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy, and especially during this time, I appreciate you giving us a few minutes to get to know you a little more.
Well, I appreciate it, and I just, the invitation, it's a real honor, John, and it'll give me a lot of street cred with the rest of my family, because we are big Mets family fans. So.
And we're Shelledy fans also, so thank you. Blessings on your journey. I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, well, thank you, John. Thank you.
Thank you.